Hi, and welcome to Notes from the Wilderness. I'm John. I'm back. We're doing our second episode of Making Peace with Who You Were. We're talking about people who have been traumatized by church or their religious faith, their background, and they've walked away. Not necessarily from faith, although some of you have, but from the tradition that you were brought up in or just your past. And today we're going to talk about something I didn't anticipate. When I first walked away from the pulpit, and that is triggers. Triggers are something that have been of note of late, and some people downplay them as psychobabble or being woke. And yet, for those of us, and for all of us, to be honest with you, even if you can't admit it, we all go through something that makes us cringe or take a step back or gasp. And if you've felt grief or loss or awkwardness, or if you've had moments of regret or torment or trauma, there could be a smell or a sound, sometimes just even a feeling that creeps you out, that brushes you back like a 99-mile-an-hour fast pitch on the inside, brushes you back from the plate. And for people who've deconstructed, oftentimes that is even just driving by a church. I know even walking by a church is triggering to some. It brings back memories. For some, it's a song, Christian radio or something comes on. For a lot of people, and we might do a separate episode on this, it's the Bible. Because the Bible's been used to bash them in ways or to hurt others that are dear to them. And so it'll be a verse that was quoted like a dagger, that was thrown at you like a dagger growing up. It could be a day. I remember when I first stopped playing football, the fall was very hard for me. I felt I didn't know what to do with myself, and I felt depressed because I had been, so used to playing football for years. And when that was gone, I didn't even want to watch football for a while because that was triggering and it made me feel depressed or down. So those of you who have gone through this, I don't need to explain it to. But some of you who haven't and you're interested, you're watching because you've got a son or a daughter or a spouse who's deconstructed and you're trying to better grasp it so you know how to communicate with them and how to still connect with them. I applaud you for being here. But yeah, triggering could be any of these things. And it's something, no matter how long ago you left, it's something that your body remembers, right? The body keeps the score. And oftentimes, even if you've outgrown it, there's something in you that's reminded of something that wasn't pleasant. It's like it's like when you have a baby and you're trying to feed it something that it knows it's not going to like, and it turns its head away from it. That's kind of life's early triggers, right? And it's not about being overly dramatic. This is your nervous system telling you. This is your sixth sense, if you will, telling you something. For some people, it might be hearing, "The heart is deceitful above all things." And the way that is said, it's like a dagger, and it's meant not inward. It's not geared inwardly for the speaker who said it to look at himself. It's really a judgment on others. I know a family who, in the communities we leave, folks, and unfortunately in evangelical Christianity, and we live in a very Mormon area, It's very hard for those who have deconstructed from the Mormon church, even more hard because there was more commitment there. Oftentimes they've served 2 years as missionaries and they feel they can't get the time back, and their families ostracize them when they leave. So this is for any individual who's left a community. But in the evangelical community, I'll speak from experience, when people even leave your church, I'm not even saying they've left the faith or they've deconstructed. Sometimes when somebody leaves the church, they're ostracized, they're judged. They decide to go to another church and they are a pariah within their former church family or people group. And so this is not something that's strange to people. If you've heard the phrase, love the sinner but hate the sin, if it was ever directed at you, that stings. It might make you feel unsafe. Again, it might make you feel that awkward feeling that you stuffed for years before you had the courage to leave. And it is a way that opens up old wounds. Dr. Gabor, you know what? Let me get this on. Let me get this up. Here we go. Dr. Mattei says, trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside of you as a result of what happened to you. Trauma is not what happens to you necessarily. It's about what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. It's not what happens to you. By the way, I could have quoted Epictetus on this, any number of Stoic philosophers, others, even Christian theologians have commented on this. It's how you respond. It's also one of the very key factors in getting over PTSD, because you never get over what the good colonel says is that he describes PTSD as a dog that jumps through a screen door, right? It startles you, scares you, and you're right back in that frozen moment where you can't move. He said dealing with PTSD doesn't mean the dog never comes back. It just means you've coached yourself how to react when the dog does bound through that screen door. And that's what the good doctor is saying here. And so triggers are real. And whether it's a verse or a song or a situation or a person, it might be a person that comes to you that made you feel small, that made you feel unseen or unheard or judged or dismissed. And that when that happens, how do we respond, right? For a lot of us, we just don't want to be in those situations, and yet you can't avoid it all. You simply can't. You can't live in a bubble where you don't drive past a church or you don't hear a phrase that comes out of the cave and haunts you. So how do we deal with it? The shame. Now, there is shame involved. When you live in a shame-honored culture, and Christianity is an ancient patriarchal culture, can be one, not all flavors of Christianity, but a lot of them, especially in the Western church. Shame and shunning is how the evangelical church responds to people who leave. They believe if they shame that person, they'll get back in line. They believe if they shun that person, and they'll have, by the way, verses to back it up. This is why verses could be so traumatic. I mean, I know a woman, grown woman, whose family is in the shaming and shunning stage of her because she's left their denomination or faith community. And they were confronted by another family member for their treatment of this daughter. And their response was to quote from Matthew, to quote that you must hate your son or daughter or your husband or your parent if that person is between you and Christ. And so here's a daughter who still believes, still a Christ follower, but has rejected what she grew up in, what was handed her from her youth. And that verse has been weaponized. People weaponize verses against you. And imagine justifying the conditional acceptance and rejection and ostracization and estrangement of your daughter by using the voice of Jesus. It's horrifying to me where I sit now, but it happens all the time. Whether it's hate the sinner and hate the sin and love the sinner, it will follow you. There's a certain shame that I brought up last week that spiritual leaders have even more than people in the pew, or that parents have who deconstruct, and yet their kids went through trauma. They drag their kids through the same trauma that they lived through, thinking they were doing the right thing, but they still have this deep regret and this sorrow and even shame for having exposed their kids to it. And so there is shame involved that has to be dealt with, and the best way to treat shame is to talk about it, to bring it out in the open, to confess it, and to release it. There's an ancient saying that when you name the demon, when you call it out, it loses its power. Shame is that demon. Part of what I'm doing right now, by doing this show, by walking with people who've deconstructed, is dealing with my shame as a former spiritual leader who perpetrated some of these things. So shame doesn't just disappear because we walk away. And some people try and deal with it by pretending it never happened, by locking it in a space, hoping it dies of exhaustion or lack of air. They try and squeeze off the oxygen to it, and it'll bubble up and it'll grow worse. It'll become a malignant sore. It'll become a malignant tumor if it's pushed down, if you try and conceal it. And as we said last week, what Brennan Manning said, you deprive the world of a roadmap to freedom if you don't share yours. So I think talking about it, now you don't have to publicize it. You don't have to put it on your socials. You can have a new community or a new confidant or a counselor or a therapist, or you could write to me. You could write in your journal to start. Just so that shame doesn't get planted and grow. It's got to be uprooted. So, oftentimes we've been taught that our worthiness was tied to our obedience, right? That's the system we grew up in. The obedient ones, the ones who parroted back the Sunday school answers, those are the ones who garnered the recognition, the acclaim, the applause, the celebration. But because our worth was tied to our obedience, and now we're considered disobedient because we've rejected a system that we found to be harmful or toxic, you carry a shame with that because it's been drummed into you maybe for decades that this is what a good Christian looks like or thinks like or talks like or behaves like, or that's the community they find themselves in. And we were taught to be respectful and submissive and being pure and straight and male-led or on fire for God. There's a lot of Christian speak that triggers people, right? We could list it all, but I know you know it. Parents whose kids have left the faith, when Christians want to screw with you or rub it in because they're in competition with you, they'll bring up your wayward child and they'll say, how is Junior doing? And Or they'll even worse, they'll say, is Junior on fire for God? Or they'll mention how their junior is and is going to Bible school, and then they'll sheepishly at the end of applauding their own children say, oh, how is your junior? What's he up to in that far country, living with the pigs and in the pigsty? You're kind of taught that it's your fault, right? Because you fall short of obedience now, and after all, if you were really good, this wouldn't be happening. I just want to tell you that when you feel that feeling, it doesn't feel good. And yet it could be like a growing pain. You could examine it. You could jot it down in a journal and expose it. Because we're not broken. We're not, if anything, we're growing. These are growing pains. And we're remembering. Some people say you're backsliding. Okay, slippery slope, sure. It's actually fun. It's like sledding. You want to call it that? Great. I call it healing. I call it growing. I call it maturing. You call it whatever you want. But what you call it will not steal my joy. It will not affect me. I won't allow it to. So one of the most powerful things that you can do, and here's where we get to the practical stage of episode 2. One of the most powerful things you can do is confront your spiritual triggers. Recognize them when they come. Recognize them as that dog who jumps through the screen door and startles you. What are they? It could be a song. It could be a number of verses. It could be driving past the church. We live by a Mormon temple and a bunch of Mormon churches, and the temple looks like something out of Wizard of Oz, and it's beautiful. And I always think of the Emerald City when I see it. If it was green, I'd be singing the Yellow Brick Road. But the churches look like something out of Mayberry, right? With the steeple and very proper, what you'd imagine and a church would look like in Mayberry, USA. And so even walking by them on a Sunday when I walk my dog, or on a Wednesday night when they're having midweek meeting, does trigger something in me. And I feel for the kids who I see walking in there, not because being Mormon is worse than being Christian, or that every church is harmful, but I know that there's going to be a myriad of kids who are pretty much trotted in and out of that building, who are going to go through deconstruction and have to deal with wounds for years and years, and maybe have to sit under counselors for years and years, just to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel themselves. And I do feel that empathy for them. Because in the evangelical church, I mean, two of the cruelest things you could do to a child, it is psychological abuse to front Christianity as something where you'll be left behind if you don't think the right way, or you're just told you're crap, that you're a bad child. How do you two of the worst things you could do to a child is abandon them, right? If you're in a mall and your mom gets lost by mistake, even that terror that a child feels. And then many evangelical Christians are brought up with the rapture ideology. You better be careful. You're not watching a bad movie when Jesus comes, and you'll be left behind. And these films are used to scare people to fear people into obedience and into the movement. And does a loving father or a loving mother do that? Expose a child to that kind of thinking even? We're told that God is the best spouse out there and the best father or the best parent out there. A good parent doesn't do that. A good parent doesn't threaten their child with being left behind or being abandoned. A good parent doesn't say to a wife, "You're nothing without me." And we know this. We intrinsically know that if we see a character on screen who says to his wife, "You're nothing without me," You're abjectly worthless without me. We know that's a bad dude. And yet, when it comes to Christian doctrine, we accept it. We kind of say, oh yeah, that's divine truth. So we've got to confront these things. Songs from youth group, even the memory of youth group and what happened there. That look that someone gives you when you say you don't go to church, right? Just recently I shared a post with my wife in our Gilbert neighborhood group. There's like 50,000 people in this group of Gilbert, the city we live in, southeast of Phoenix. And somebody just moved in and they asked for recommendations of churches, and it turned into an all-out brawl, a WWE Royal Rumble. It got political real fast, and it got ugly. And this person wanted to follow Jesus. She's a red-letter Christian. And she was ridiculed as being liberal. Somebody told her, why don't you just watch MSNBC? This just from simply wanting to find a church that suited her. And there were comments on there from people who either have left the faith or have never been in it. And one person just commented, they had to turn the comments off on this post. That's how bad it gets. One person just commented, Christianity is so toxic. I would put an asterisk on that. Some Christianity is toxic. You might even say most, depending on where you live and when. Certainly in our world today, when it's become politicized and weaponized against people who don't vote a certain way. Yeah, it's become toxic. Well, here's some practical things you can do. Name the demon, and it loses its power. So write down what the demons are. Name it. Name what has been used against you to shame you, whether it's the heart is deceitful above all things, or hate the sin, love the sinner, any of these things. And here's something practical that you can do this week. If you're keeping that faith journal or that journey vlog, your travel log, out of the cave. If you're examining where you are now, jot it down in there. Name the demon and make it lose its power. Name the shame. Turn it out. But you could also start new traditions. You could start a new liturgy. Look, the Bible does not trigger me. I know it triggers many people, but I don't allow it that power because I see it as a library. I don't see it as something that God wrote or dictated. I see it as men who saw through a glass dimly, trying to do their best. And they were particular men of a particular time with particular hindrances, and yet there's some extreme beauty there. So you don't burn down the whole library of Alexandria just because there's some passages or some books that don't suit you or that you find ridiculous. Pan for the gold and save the gold in your jewelry box and let the muck stay in the river. Yes, curate your own hymn book, your own hymnal, and they don't have to be Christian songs. One of the things I love about Bono and U2 is he considered Christian music for a while, and then he found it so abjectly horrid. And he said it's nothing like the Psalms, nothing like what he called God's hymnal, right? The Psalms get angry with God. The Psalms get angry that the righteous sometimes don't prevail and the wicked succeed. And they argue with God and they say crazy things. And he's like, I find more freedom and truth in the Psalms than I do in modern Christian music. And so it might be a U2 song. God Part 2 is a great song. I Believe in Love. There are songs. Lenny Kravitz did a whole album that kind of tips its hat to Jesus Christ. I find that I enjoy more songs outside of the church that have leanings towards faith than I do on songs within the church, and yet I still love to hear the old hymns or the Southern gospel. I still do. There's very few. I mean, modern Christian music makes me throw up in my mouth. I mean, the K-Love stuff. I can't stand that. Although there's a few people, Lauren Daigle and the country guy, I can't remember his name. All My Hope Is in Jesus guy. He lives in Nashville. I don't know. You guys could comment on who his name is. I can't remember his name, but I enjoy him. But mostly, I love the old stuff. The stuff I heard my mom playing on Moody Radio when she was ironing clothes. So that's still in my liturgy. It still makes me smile when it comes on, as long as it isn't one of those modern versions that muckities it up. So write your own liturgy. Put together your own library that you call the Bible. Maybe it's got Dr. Seuss in it. Maybe it's got C.S. Lewis. Maybe it's got Epictetus. Maybe it's got Marcus Aurelius. Maybe it has William Wordsworth. Put together your own liturgy. Put together your own prayer book. Make your own sacred space that doesn't make you cringe, that you don't have to hide from. Write down your own affirmations. Worship your own way, whether it's near a lit candle, meditating, or walking through the woods, or maybe it's singing songs with friends. The fellowship, don't let that go away. Create your own new rituals, not to impress others, not even to impress God, but to honor your new way. So, let's just wrap this up. You're not broken. You're healing. And that's sacred. And you're not weak for flinching. You're not. Of course you're going to flinch when the dog jumps through the screen door. What you do next is what counts. So be mindful of that. And start building a strategy, right? You are remembering your way back home, even if you've never been to this home, even if it's a new home you haven't lived in yet. You're on your way there. This journey and out in this wilderness, it's not a punishment. You haven't been banished. You haven't been exiled. You've chosen to leave because it's healthier, because the air is cleaner, because the water is cleaner, because the community is healthier. Let me just leave it like that. So here's to hoping you feel a little more seen and a little more heard, and that Notes from the Wilderness, is just a flower along the way on your path that you could admire, maybe smell, that makes you smile when you see it or hear it. That's what I hope to be for you. If you want to comment, you could comment publicly. If you want to write me privately, you can do that too. If you want to just use this as inspiration and prompts for your weekly liturgy with yourself and your journal, do it. And we'll see you next week when we talk about the role of the Bible and how we approach the Bible in recovery. So I appreciate you folks, and thank you all for listening, and we will see you all next week.